Welcome back to the deep dive, everyone. Today we're going somewhere a little unexpected, maybe. Yeah, the link
Oh,
between nasal health and asthma. We've got
interesting.
these articles from Asthma Friend, tons of great information, tips, and personal stories, which is what I think makes this deep dive so interesting. We're not just talking theory, right? We're getting into the real-life experiences of people in the Asthma Friend community.
Yeah, that's so valuable.
Think about it. You're dealing with asthma, and then suddenly you find out you have nasal polyps too. Or maybe you've always had allergic rhinitis, and you're wondering if it's connected to your asthma.
Right.
That's what we're going to unpack today.
And what's really fascinating is that there's this common thread that runs through all of it, inflammation. It's like the root cause of both asthma and these seemingly unrelated nasal conditions.
Yeah, that's what I noticed too. The articles kept mentioning inflammation as the underlying issue, but how does inflammation in your nose actually affect your asthma?
Well, think of your respiratory system as this delicate ecosystem. When one part's out of balance, it affects everything. So when your nasal passages are inflamed, it creates this domino effect.
Okay.
You start breathing through your mouth, which dries out your airways, making them more sensitive to irritants. And then you've got postnasal drip, that constant mucus dripping down your throat, which can trigger coughs. It's a vicious cycle.
So it's not just about blocked airways, it's this whole chain reaction of inflammation that makes your entire respiratory system more sensitive.
Exactly. And that's why taking care of your nasal health is so important for managing asthma. It's all about tackling that inflammation right at the source.
That makes a lot of sense. Now, one of the articles talks about nasal polyps, describing them as these soft, non-cancerous growths in the nasal passages. And what's interesting is that they're not always easy to spot. The article mentions someone who only found out they had polyps after getting a CT scan.
That's why it's so important to pay attention to any persistent nasal symptoms, like congestion, loss of smell, facial pressure. Those could all be signs of polyps quietly making your asthma worse.
And the article seemed to suggest that nasal irrigation could be a potential solution.
Hmm.
We've all heard about it, but does it really work?
The science behind it is pretty solid. Nasal irrigation, or JalNeti as it's traditionally called, is all about flushing out those irritants and allergens from your nasal passages with a saline solution, like a gentle cleanse for your nose.
Okay, so I'm picturing this saline solution washing away all the gunk. But how does that actually help with asthma control?
Remember that inflammation we talked about?
Yeah.
Nasal irrigation helps to soothe and calm that inflammation in the nasal passages. And by clearing out the mucus and irritants, it helps to reduce postnasal drip, which, as we discussed, can be a major trigger for asthma symptoms.
So it's like breaking that cycle of inflammation and irritation that can make asthma so much harder to manage.
Exactly. And it's not just about easing symptoms, it's about creating a healthier environment for your whole respiratory system.
The article also mentions something called aspirin-exacerbated respiratory disease, or AED.
Right.
Can you explain what that is and how it relates to all of this?
AED is a condition where people with both asthma and nasal polyps have serious breathing problems after taking aspirin or other similar painkillers.
Oh, wow.
It's a complex reaction, but basically these medications trigger a wave of inflammation in these individuals, leading to a sudden worsening of their respiratory symptoms.
So it's like their sensitivity to inflammation is even higher, and those medications just set it off.
Precisely. It's a reminder that managing inflammation is crucial, especially for people with AERD, and nasal irrigation can be a really valuable tool for them.
Now, I'm kind of curious about the practical side of this whole thing. What does nasal irrigation actually look like?
Well, it's actually pretty simple. Basically, you're using a saline solution to rinse your nasal passages, like giving your nose a bath.
Okay, that sounds pretty easy, but are we talking about those neti pots I've seen around?
Yeah, exactly. Neti pots are pretty popular, but you can also use squeeze bottles specifically designed for nasal irrigation.
Uh-huh.
They both work the same way. You gently pour the saline solution into one nostril, and it flows as the other, taking all that mucus and those irritants with it.
Okay, so walk me through it. What are the steps?
All right, so first you need to make your saline solution. You can buy pre-made saline packets, or you can just mix your own using distilled water, non-iodized salt, and a pinch of baking soda.
Baking soda, huh?
Yep, the baking soda helps balance the pH, makes the solution more comfortable for your nasal passages.
The article mentions someone who found plain salt water kind of irritating, but adding baking soda made a big difference. It's amazing how those little things can matter.
Absolutely. It's all about finding what works best for you. So once you have your solution ready, it's time to rinse, lean over a sink, tilt your head slightly to the side, and gently insert the neti pot spout or the squeeze bottle's nozzle into your upper nostril.
Okay, got it. And then just let it flow through.
Exactly. Breathe through your mouth while you're rinsing, and the solution will naturally flow out of your other nostril. It might feel a little weird at first,
I can imagine.
but you get used to it pretty quickly.
The article also mentioned cleaning your equipment. Any tips on that?
Definitely, after each use, wash your neti pot or squeeze bottle with hot soapy water and let it air dry completely. This prevents any bacteria from growing.
Right.
And make sure your next rinse is clean.
Makes sense. So are there any specific products you would recommend? The article mentioned a couple.
Yeah, there are some great ones out there. For beginners, the Abbott Soul Spray Saline Spray is a really good option. It's pre-mixed and super easy to use, just a few spritzes in each nostril.
Sounds good. What about for people who are maybe a little more experienced with nasal irrigation?
Well, for those folks, the Cipla Wash Nasal Rinse Kit is a popular choice. It comes with a squeeze bottle and saline sachets, so you have more control over the rinsing process.
Okay, it's great that there are options for everyone. Now, are there any precautions people should be aware of?
For sure. It's important not to overdo it.
Okay.
Once or twice a day is usually enough. More than that could actually irritate your nasal lining.
Yeah, that makes sense. It's like anything else. Moderation is key.
Exactly. And of course, if you experience any pain or discomfort during the rinse, stop right away and talk to your doctor.
The article also mentioned that people with ear infections should avoid nasal irrigation.
That's right. It's always best to err on the side of caution and check with your doctor if you have any other health conditions.
Good advice. It sounds like nasal irrigation could be especially helpful for certain people.
Absolutely. Anyone with asthma and allergic rhinitis could benefit from it. And for people living in areas with a lot of pollution, it can help clear out those airborne irritants that can trigger asthma symptoms.
So if you're dealing with congestion sinus problems, or even if you just feel like your nasal passages need a good cleaning, nasal irrigation might be worth trying.
Yeah, it's a natural, drug-free way to support your respiratory health, and it could potentially make a big difference in managing your asthma.
You know, we've talked a lot about the science and how to do nasal irrigation, but I'm curious about what it's actually like for people. The articles we're looking at have some real-life stories from the Asthma Friend community.
Right. Hearing from people who are actually living with these conditions adds a whole other layer to it.
Exactly. One person shared how nasal irrigation and using nasal sprays regularly have been game changers for their allergic rhinitis and asthma. It's inspiring to see how such simple practices can have such a big impact.
It really underscores that connection between nasal health and overall well-being.
They even mention how these practices have helped them breathe better, sleep better, and just enjoy life more. It's a reminder that we don't have to let these conditions control us.
And that's the whole point of the Asthma Trend community, to empower people to take control of their health and find solutions that work for them.
It's amazing how something so simple can make such a difference, huh?
Yeah, it really is. It speaks to the power of these non-invasive approaches.
Right. And for some people, it might be that one thing that's been missing in their asthma management.
Absolutely. Sometimes we get so focused on treating the lungs that we forget about how important the nasal passages are.
Yeah, it's all about that holistic approach, recognizing that everything's connected.
Exactly. And that's what's so great about the Asthma Friend community. They provide such a supportive space for people to connect and learn from each other and find new ways to manage their conditions.
Speaking of the community, the articles we've been talking about are full of advice and tips from real people living with asthma and nasal conditions.
Like the person who talked about their experience with nasal polyps and how regular nasal irrigation really helped them get their symptoms under control.
Yeah, it's one thing to hear about the science from us, but it's another to hear it from someone who's actually been through it.
Exactly. Their story really shows how important it is to pay attention to your body and advocate for your own health.
They mentioned how they initially just thought their nasal symptoms were allergies, but deep down they knew something wasn't quite right.
And it was only when they started doing their own research and connecting with other people in the Asthma Friend community that they realized nasal polyps could be contributing to their problems.
That's a great example of how knowledge and community can empower us to take charge of our health.
Absolutely. And it reminds us that we're not alone in this. There are people out there who understand what we're going through and are willing to share their experiences and support.
So as we wrap up this deep dive, I want to leave you with this. If you're dealing with asthma and haven't really looked into the connection with your nasal health, maybe give nasal irrigation a try.
It's a simple, natural thing you can do that could make a big difference.
And don't forget, the Asthma Friend community is there for you every step of the way.
Yep, they've got tons of resources, tips, and personal stories to help you out.
You can find a link to their website in the show notes. And if you found this deep dive helpful, don't forget to subscribe to our podcast and share it with your friends and family.
We're all in this together, and the more we learn and share, the better equipped we'll be to breathe easier and live healthier lives.
Until next time, take care and keep exploring those connections between nasal pus and asthma.